Hello, hello. What day is today? Sunday. It is February 15, 2026. And this is The Dictators, along with my co-host and friend, Jonathan Fink. Jonathan, how are you today?
I am good. It's been an absolutely torrential day of rain here, and I think that kind of mirrors somehow the state of the world, all washed out and sodden.
Oh boy, yeah, it's well, I say this every time we talk. It's been quite a week. There's never any shortage of
Every week is quite a
catastrophes,
week, unfortunately. Yeah.
tragedies, just oh my god. In any event, today's episode of The Dictators, which by the way, we do every Friday at this time. Live stream of The Dictators, a relatively new series that me and Jonathan put together. So please mark your calendars. It's shown on YouTube. It's shown on my website, which is protectingtherepublic.com. So you can see it either place. And we tried to talk about the most catastrophic of the catastrophes of that week. And today we are going to focus on arguably the biggest catastrophe, at least in the United States, which was the disgraceful hearing before the United States Congress of the American Attorney General, Pam, the pedophile protector Bondi. She is a disgrace. She's a disgrace as an American, as an attorney general, and as a woman, in my opinion. And if all goes right, technically, I'm going to show a brief 2-minute video of her, again, just disgraceful performance before the U.S. Congress. And before I go off on a rant, which I will, Jonathan, what do you think about old Miss Bondi's performance this week?
I did watch it. I watched several of the repetitions of it, from the Bulwark to the Midas Touch, had various slots on it. So I think I saw some of her core appearance. What came through to me was the utter contempt for democracy, and the refusal to be held to account for anything. It's worth comparing to the British Parliament, because we have what's called Prime Minister's Question Times, which often is, it's on a Wednesday afternoon. It's often the sort of knockabout. It's the bit you see where everyone's screaming at each other, flapping their papers around, hurling insults. So we do have a kind of knockabout format, but we also have a format which is called select committees. And that's where people, whether they be, say, tech entrepreneurs or bureaucrats or, well, anyone that is pertinent to a particular issue, they are brought forth and they are held to account. They're not allowed to disrespect who's questioning them. They are not allowed to filibuster. They are not allowed to push back. Even if they're not always truthful, if they perjure themselves, it's an incredibly serious issue. They're not allowed to behave in this way. There's a certain sense, I dare say, of respect and awe for the institution of Parliament and the need to answer truthfully. What we saw here was unbelievable. It was a circus. It showed absolute contempt for due process. That was a point made, I think, by several of the commentators. What it also showed is that this is an administration perhaps that is desperate, but feels that is not accountable and cannot be held accountable to the traditional organs of democracy in the US.
I agree. I mean, she epitomized all or a lot that is wrong with this administration. Forget just the rules breaking, the laws breaking, the criminality of this administration. But it, like you said, it's the utter contempt, the in your face finger pointing and insults that this administration, as shown by the Attorney General of the United States this week at U.S. congressmen, behaving in this appalling manner, just something I don't think you would see in a high school debate. You really wouldn't. And you made a good point about the British Parliament. I am by no means an expert, of course, but I have seen many sessions of Parliament. And you're right. They are rather entertaining in that they do tend to get rather boisterous and loud. But in my experience, it's all not necessarily in a good humor, but it's done within the certain bounds of law and decorum.
Yes, it is. You
And they
overstep and you'll be held to
exactly,
account. Yeah.
exactly. I correct me if I'm wrong. if a Ms. Bondi, if a member of the parliament, if an MP behaved the way that Ms. Bondi did to a member of parliament, or God forbid, the prime minister, what would be the repercussions?
Well, first of all, she'd be stopped and checked. I don't know the specifics of that, but the Speaker of the House would immediately step in and essentially correct her behavior. He would also force her to retract certain statements, especially if they were considered either libelous or insulting. Now, you do have a certain license in the House of Commons to say things that you may get sued for outside, and you cannot be sued for doing it. So there are many instances where actually critical information that the public ought to know, but which has various injunctions against it, has been released within the protective environment of Parliament. And I think that's fantastic. But her behavior would have not gone on so long. She would have been stopped, she would have been checked, she would have been asked to retract. If she carried on with that behavior, she would have been removed from the chamber and quite possibly banned for a period of time. It
What
would
is the
not have
penalty?
stood to pass. And that's just Parliament, which is, as you say, boisterous in a select committee. They are far more rigorous, and the atmosphere in those sessions, I would say, is they're really held to account there, and people are probed by experts, by people who actually know their stuff. What you don't have in the select committees, I mean, sometimes you do, but what you don't have is this extraordinary party political point scoring. You'll have people often on a bipartisan basis asking genuine probing questions, expert questions to the witnesses that are called. That's not what we saw here. This was a complete circus. Now, I think there was a genuine attempt by some of the Democrats there to ask genuine and sincere questions that were in the public interest. There was an attempt by some Republicans even to ask some genuine questions.
At least one.
Everything was it's just one. Yeah. Everything was slapped back. So, but what strikes me is the absolutely partisan, I would say almost broken system and format, but also the absolute impunity that she showed. Now, what do you think? I mean, is this a government that doesn't think it would have to face another election, therefore it does not care, or another fair election? Or are they so desperate they're willing to break every convention of normal behavior?
Well, and to answer your question first, I think it's a combination of both of those reasons. But I also want to say that to those that are not familiar with the American system of government, which are probably most people, including Americans, that is not, or this is not the way our governments functioned for almost all of our history, except for the last year or so. Not even during the first Trump administration did we see such unbelievably rude, anti-American, and anti-rules, crude behavior in the House of the People's House, the House of Representatives. We just didn't see this. Whether or not there was animosity, differences of opinion, voting upon party lines, protecting their party members, this just didn't happen. But a problem, one of the biggest problems we have in this country, aside from the polarization, is the fact that our system of government does and always has depended on the members of governments adhering to the rules. And the rules are not all that clear sometimes, but even worse, Jonathan, there's very often no enforcement mechanisms to enforce those rules, which is why a big reason why we're in the position we are now. The who's ever in power, which in this case is the Republicans, can do whatever they want. If you have an extremist, and I'm sorry, fascist party and leader in power, they literally can steamroll over the rules that have existed for 250 years, and there's no real enforcement mechanism to stop them. To answer your question again, is it a combination, or is it a fact that they don't believe they'll have to run for elections, or that they're really desperate to cover up essentially for their crimes? I think it's both. Look, I think Pam Bondi is, I don't think she's covering up. She is the lead cover-upper for President Trump, for Donald Trump and his tech bros, and I'm sorry to say, many really rich, powerful Democrats as well. It just isn't the Republicans. There's a whole host of very rich, very powerful, very famous people, both in and out of government, who are going to be implicated in the Epstein saga, the Epstein files, when all is said and done. But she is primarily and specifically in charge of protecting, first, Donald Trump, second, Donald Trump, and then after that, Donald Trump. That's her job.
He asked her, I mean, did he say to her, you're not allowed to say anything. You're not allowed to say anything at all? Because it seems that she did not have sanction to, well, give anything away. Literally, she had to filibuster and push back on everything. She didn't give a single straight answer to a single question. Do you think she was under a clear directive to behave in that way?
Absolutely. But I do believe that. But here's what I think. And I followed Pam Bondi for years. She used to be the Attorney General of the state of Florida. So I'm aware of her actions and antics for many, many years. Before this, she was a bootlicker for Governor Ron DeSantis, who is a Trump clone, and ran for president as a Republican. If those of you remember, he's a real charter member of MAGA. So I believe that, yes, she was given that directive, Jonathan, but I also think a lot of it was her own stumbling, bumbling way of trying to protect him. Do you remember the part of the testimony that she gave when she was asked a straight out question about cover-ups and names in the Epstein files and the victims? And she went off on this delusional rant about how well the stock market is doing. That was grotesque. Obviously, when you consider what, because people may not necessarily know, but some congressmen have now got access to parts of the Epstein files unredacted, but they have to go to a little room somewhere. There are 4 terminals. They're given their own individual login, which means that the administration can understand exactly who has seen what, which is fairly insidious. But some of them have come out and said what they've seen is beyond horrifying. So we have to assume there are many, many victims here. Therefore, Pam Bondi's behavior is an absolute slap in the face to all the victims. It is grotesque when you consider or even try to imagine the kind of crimes that have taken place. Well, did you see, and again, I don't know how much of the testimony you saw, but many of the victims, I don't know if it was 10, 20, 30 of the victims were standing behind her when she gave the testimony. And a congressman, a Democratic congressman, asked Bondi if she would turn around and apologize to the victims for her stonewalling, for her covering up of the Epstein files, and she refused. She wouldn't even address him. In fact, she came out with her finger pointing, saying how he is an embarrassment and a disgrace. You know, I tell you what, if I can, I'm going to try to run.
Let's try and play. I have a clip there.
I have a 2-minute clip here that I'm hoping will play, and it will certainly give you folks that haven't seen it or seen any of this testimony an idea of what we're talking about if it plays. And let's give it a go here. I think it's literally 2 minutes, 1 minute and 59 seconds. So let's hope this plays. Hold on, folks.
That the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God.
I do.
Let the record show that the witness has answered.
Trump orders up prosecutions like pizza, and you deliver every time. He tells you to go after James Comey, Letitia James, Lisa Cook, and Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve Board. And
I am deeply sorry for what any victim has been through.
Will you turn to them now and apologize for what your Department of Justice has put them through?
I'm not going to get in the gutter for her theatrics. I find it.
How many have you indicted?
Excuse me. I'm going to answer the question.
Answer my question.
No, I'm going to answer the question the way I want to answer the question.
No,
Your
you're going to answer
theatrics
the
are
question
ridiculous.
the way I asked it.
Chairman Jordan, I'm not going to get in the gutter with these people.
You can let her filibuster all day long, but not on our watch. Not on our time. No way. And I told you about that, Attorney General, before you started.
You don't tell me
Yeah,
anything.
I did tell you because we saw what you did in the Senate.
Lawyer, not even a lawyer.
Committee will be in order.
I have several questions for you. Who's responsible? Are you able to track who in your organization made this massive failure and released the victims' names?
We corrected that within 40 minutes. He was already, you're acting like everybody's trying to cover up Wexner's name.
Reclaiming my time.
I'm going to answer this question.
Reclaiming my time.
Mr.
Chairman.
This is how this works.
Was the president aware of Secretary Lutnick's ties to Epstein when he chose him to lead the Department of Commerce? Was he aware?
Chris Malin was a Border Patrol agent.
Okay, so I'm going to conclude that the president, in fact, did know about his ties because he was the next door neighbor.
Shame on you.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
You're
this
from
is
a tiny,
pathetic.
beautiful
This is
state.
pathetic, Mr.
Committee will
Chair.
be in order.
I am not asking trick questions here.
You
The
got your
American
5
people
minutes.
have a right to know the answers to this. These are senior officials in the Trump administration.
Well, there you have it. Jonathan, I'll give you the first comments on
what
that
a
travesty.
show. I mean, she said that, they released some names and this and that, and we corrected it. Well, the fact is that more than half the documents have not been released. The fact is that many of the perpetrators were redacted out, and many of the victims' names were released. So we can see where their priorities lie. It's not with protecting the victims or even following up. It's quite clearly in not just protecting the perpetrators, but of course, trying to protect the web of connections. Because I'm going to throw this back to you. Trump is apparently mentioned almost 1 million times in these documents in aggregate. We don't have many of the documents where he is mentioned yet released or know what's in them. There are persistent rumors that some of these documents have been shredded and destroyed and deleted. But is Trump afraid just because he's directly mentioned, or is he also afraid because if some of these perpetrators go down, they may well know things about him? So this could become a cascade effect, not just what's in the documents themselves.
Look, I find it beyond belief that Donald Trump is not directly implicated in the Epstein files. It just is not possible with just the very limited amount of information that's come out. Look, one of the or several of the Congress people that did get to see the redacted copies of the files that were made available to them during the 2 hours that they were allowed in the SCIF, in the secure room, to view them. The people in the room, the people that are responsible in the DOJ, Department of Justice, for going through the Epstein files, said that when they received the Epstein files, they were already redacted. So they couldn't answer the questions of the Congress people, the men and women, about, well, what was redacted? What was under the redaction, these black marks? What names or incidents and information is under here? That's why we're here. We want to find this out. And the very people responsible in the Department of Justice did not know. They said that's how we received them. So, and I believe, look, there's 3 million pages at least that are now supposed to be out there that have not been unredacted, have not been reviewed by Congress. And there's probably more, Jonathan. That's what they've said so far. If you have 3 million pages, I don't know if you've ever seen 3 million pages. That's a lot. I haven't. And if
I've not, no. I mean,
no, I have.
Might be.
And if they're, if many of them are redacted beyond, just redacted, just think of the information that's in there. Look, one of the things that the Congress people did learn, and I forget this, how they learned it, that there was at least one 9-year-old victim, a 9-year-old girl who was trafficked by either Epstein himself or some of his cohorts, whether these are the tech bros or who knows who in his circle that we know of. So we're not even talking about just, if you could, 15, 16-year-old girls. We're talking about victims as young as 9 and maybe more. That's what we don't know. And was Donald Trump directly involved in that? Again, we have no proof yet. Why? Because Pam, protecting the pedophiles, Bondi, is stopping the investigation. She's pointing her fingers at Congress people that have the gall to ask her for the truth. I don't know what's going to happen, but the title of this Dictators, Jonathan, is Pam Bondi Needs to Go to Prison. And I believe when they do lose the elections, should we actually have elections, that the Pam Bondis and the Kash Patels and the J.D. Vances and the Christines are going to be investigated. They're going to be arrested, indicted, and serve long prison terms if we're allowed to have fair elections again, which I don't know if that's going to happen.
It'll be right. It'll be ironic if Kennedy is the only one who doesn't go down for participation in this regime. But I shouldn't mention this one, but he came out with a classic this week about not being afraid of bacteria and viruses because
well, if he's not in the Epstein files, and I've seen no proof that he has, very seriously, he's going to go down for the many deaths that he is causing and will cause by his anti-vaccine hysteria. We have a major measles outbreak, Jonathan. I don't know if you're aware of that. In the United States.
Well, this is it, and there will be people who will be maimed and injured. There'll be people who die as a result of this. Of course, it is. We're back in the dark ages. If you've read Carl Sagan's demon-haunted world, this is what this clown crew are bringing us back to.
And that is because of people like Pam Bondi being in charge of agencies like the Department of Justice, or in Kennedy's case, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I mean, the fact that these people are in charge of these agencies still shocks me and gives me nightmares. But now they've been in office over a year, and the damage, it never stops. It just doesn't stop. And we're not going to talk about NATO or Russia or Ukraine in this particular segment. There's just not enough time. But the damage that they've done.
I mean, it's immense damage. And the question is whether it's going to take decades to roll back, and indeed whether American economy is fit enough to actually roll back to the, I would say, to the civilizational level it was at before Trump took over. Let's look at reasons why Trump might not fire all these people. You have Kristi Noem, who is ghastly. You have Carolyn Leavitt, who is ghastly. These are immoral people. They purposefully hang giant crosses around their necks, which feels to me as some kind of monumental trolling as well. But why might Trump not want to fire any of them? I'm thinking here that they're not only do they know where the skeletons are buried, they're also deflecting a lot of the negative media coverage away from him. While they're in the spotlight, he is not.
Well, let's talk about this. And you and I had talked about it off air, and now it's a good time to get to it. Not only that, and you voiced this question, Jonathan, why are the cult people, the criminal cabal surrounding Trump, the closest ones, why are they doing what they're doing? Why are they deflecting, defending, doing what they know is morally reprehensible and is certainly illegal and unconstitutional, when they themselves, although they be making a little bit of the grift, are not making tons of money? And in doing so, they are destroying their careers and their lives. You mentioned Giuliani as a perfect example, a poster boy for somebody who's defended Trump and has been thrown under the bus.
Relatively nice life. He had a reputation, obviously, after being mayor. I mean, probably unwarranted after 9/11. He was America's not poor either. Now he's physically and financially broken.
So let's ask this question of the viewers, and we'll bat it amongst us. Why are they defending this indefensible administration and only allowing the tech bros, the billionaire, in some cases trillionaire tech bros, to take advantage of it, to reap the monetary rewards, while they themselves are being destroyed, and if I am correct, are going to go to prison after this administration, after the Republicans lose the next election, should we have elections? What are they gaining out of this right now, and why are they doing it? I know you said you don't know, but what's your best guesses at this point?
We've talked about Trump being a cult for a long time, and it seems that even in normal times, there is a certain aura of power that resides around the White House and the ritual of it. It seems that Trump's cult personality, his bullying and abusive and manipulative personality, seems to suck people in. And when you combine it with the sort of the glitz and the razzmatazz of American politics and the White House and its traditions and whatnot, there seems to be a pretty toxic mixture. Once you're pulled, it seems, into that gravitational field, it becomes very difficult to extricate yourself from it until you get sucked further and further, and the gravity tears you to pieces. I wonder what it's like behind the scenes, because if we listen to is it Martin Wolf, who's the author who wrote The Art of the Deal? I think it's Wolf, isn't it?
It's Wolf. That's not his first name, but yes.
Yeah. He was a fly on the wall during the first administration, and we do have various accounts of it. And it seems to be an incredibly unstable, explosive environment where you just don't know what Trump's mood is going to be. And he could be shouting and screaming at you, or, he could be potentially, non-volatile at moments. But that feels like an abusive kind of psychology. It conditions people. It breaks their independence of spirit, almost like an abused spouse, as it were. You fail to see what's normal and what isn't when you're sort of sucked into that. And when you combine it with, dare I say it, this, like the comment we got on the screen here, where you've got this sort of extraordinary conspiratorial frame of thinking that's given up, especially amongst people who may not be particularly well-educated, well-read, or well-rounded. It seems like a pretty explosive, cult-like kind of psychological mixture. That's all I can come up with there, because it's mystifying, frankly. If they're not earning oodles of money, then why would you agree to be destroyed in such a fashion?
I guess I do agree with you, because as we're saying, they are not making tons of money. Yes, they are definitely making money. If they weren't rich before, they're rich now, but they're not in the billionaire class. They're not reaping in the rewards that the tech bros are by the loosening of regulations, or the elimination of regulations for their tech companies, or their factories, or their coal mining. So it's got to be the allure of power, which is what you're saying. The fact that once you get to that level, once you're working for the White House, the president, that it's just hypnotic, or in this case, a cult, a genuine cult, a cult of the damned. And there's no getting out of it. They will go down like the last Nazis in Berlin, in the Reichschancellery, down to the last bullet as the Soviets were pounding up the stairs to take down the flag. That's where this administration is at. I mean, those that are closest to him, the Stephen Millers and the Levitts and the Gnomes and all those people, they're going to go down to their last breath because it's a cult. And I'm sorry, I have to say this. Yes, we've had the allure of power and dishonest people in and around the White House throughout our entire history. It's never been like this. Never.
No.
And anybody says that it's the worst it's been in recent history is nuts. Not in recent history, Jonathan. In our
possibly never
history.
Been
never.
Like this.
Never. There's never been anything like this. Never, never, never. I mean, we are living in under a almost totally fascist government. We may or may not have fair elections. I'm not going to say we won't have elections. That's a possibility, but I don't believe it's for sure. I believe that we will have elections in November, but they will not be fair. Every statement that Trump and his criminal cabal makes recently is how they're going to control the election. And as I think,
well, the introduction of passport checks, I mean, now having to bring several documents, including a passport, we know that many, many Americans do not have passports because they have not traveled abroad.
And
so
he just made it illegal for libraries in America to process passports, which was like a very majority or a big part of how immigrants and other people got their passports. The point is he is going to control the elections. And again, I think it was Stalin that says it's not how many people cast the votes, it's who counts the votes. And the Republican Party, MAGA, is now going to be in charge of casting the votes according to Trump, in at least 15 states. And I'm sure more than that. He just threw that number out because he throws numbers out.
You may or might know a MAGA cultist has actually brought up Dominion voting systems, which is used in a significant number of states.
I did a podcast about that and wrote an article about that.
Of course you did.
No, he bought this back in October. He is a classic or poster boy as an election denier. I forget his name. It doesn't matter. But he of course named it some bizarre name like patriotic or freedom voting. Something
this
crazy.
is a good
like
point
that.
that's been made here. But it's a good point, but we need to address it head on. Don't more Democrats have a passport than Republicans? Quite possibly. I don't know the stats, but that doesn't matter because they're not sending ICE to Republican states, even if there may be immigration issues. They're sending them to Democrat states. Are they going to force Republicans out of voting booths because they don't have a passport? No, of course they're not going to do that. They're not going to enforce these rules in areas which they want to win. They're only going to enforce it in areas which are marginal for their vote. And of course, with Trump's behavior, more and more and more areas are becoming marginal. That might be one thing that unsticks their plan. They might not be at the right stage of their democratic slide to corrupt the election to the extent that may be required given Trump's unpopularity. He's accelerating ahead of their ability perhaps to gerrymander, but they're certainly going to try, and they're certainly not going to discriminate against people voting.
Folks, think about this scenario, and I'm not being hyperbolic because this is exactly what the Trump administration has been saying. Think about this. Come November, Trump, the administration, DOJ under Pam Bondi, sends out federal troops, maybe just ICE, maybe a combination of the two, National Guard, whatever, uniformed, heavily armed personnel to the polling stations in Democratic states only, cities, districts, whatever. They they ask for the ID of everyone that's standing in line. They don't go within the across the line that it's illegal. They stay just far enough from the entrance to the polling stations where they're legal. But they ask for the ID and intimidate everybody that's standing in line. And if they feel a person is not legitimate, that they are a criminal, an immigrant criminal, they take them out of the line. And if there's anything said at all, you'll start to see scenes like in Minneapolis where they're wrestled to the ground and handcuffed and taken away. Just picture that happening dozens, hundreds of times every day during the voting day.
In voting queues, people
in
hold
voting
out
queues.
of
In voting queues. And let's go one step further. And then there is an anonymous complaint that there is voting irregularities, voting fraud in thousands of democratically controlled voting locations, and the military and or the DHS is ordered to seize all of the ballots in those districts. And they, MAGA, the Republicans, and maybe even the military, will count those ballots in Democratic states and districts. That is not far-fetched. I believe that's exactly what is going to happen. And in that scenario, Jonathan, who do you think is going to win the election?
Yeah. And if they lose a particular ward or a particular constituency or state, then they're going to challenge the result. Then they're going to strong arm and threaten the people, as they tried to do in Georgia. We've already seen how that runs in Georgia to get votes overturned even after they are nominally announced.
We've had judges and their families killed in their houses for less than that. Just because they criticized Trump or the Republicans. No, they're not going to cancel the elections. They're going to make it so hard on immigrants, certainly, but even on just many normal people that they won't vote. And the ones that do could be arrested and or roughed up in the polling lines when they're standing in the queue to go into to vote. And like I said, as a last resort, or maybe as a first resort, the Republicans will seize the voting machines and or the paper ballots only in democratically held districts, states, and other locations, cities, and they will then count the votes in those democratically held areas. And in that way, the Republicans can never lose another election.
And of course, they are accelerating in their unpopularity. So it seems whatever measures they're planning, whatever measures are in Stephen Miller's head and others, they're going to have to really double down on it because Trump's unpopularity is accelerating. It seems that they are losing big portions of the right-wing so-called, bro podcast universe. Do you see that having any impact? Do you see some of these people going back to Trump closer to the election, or is there a really significant rupture in the right-wing podosphere?
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought it up. I can't tell you how many stories I read every day or see podcasts about how there's massive ruptures within MAGA, about how they're finally seeing the light, or even podcasts about, just average American Republican voters who are having second thoughts, buyer's remorse about having voted for Trump. I don't see any of that. I'm sorry. That makes great stories, and it gets a lot of clicks, on YouTube and other social media. I don't see it. If you look at any of the recent big polls, I'm talking major polls that have been taking place over the last several weeks, certainly Trump's overall ratings have gone down, but I don't see any mass exodus from the Republican voters going to vote for Democrats, for example. And one of the most telling polls recently about all of the tragedies that took place in Minnesota and Minneapolis, the majority of the Republican voters, those that voted for Donald Trump and the Republicans that consider themselves Trump supporters, were supportive of all of the measures that DHS has been taken in Minneapolis, including the 2 murders in Minneapolis. And I think 3/4 of them, right about 75%, said that DHS either acted appropriately during those shootings or they didn't go far enough. Those are major, like Reuters, AP, Ipsos types of surveys amongst current MAGA or Republican voters. That doesn't say that they are, jumping ship and losing faith in the Republican Party, and that there's going to be a massive, defection to Democrats. I'm not saying that the Democrats won't win if there's a fair election, but I do not see a mass defection or second thoughts among Republican voters right now.
And one has to ask what it would take, if this sort of screaming performance of a kind of Pam Bondi, how can you compare it? Like a lethal siren of ancient Egypt or something, some sort of biblical monster. If this stuff doesn't turn people off, then I don't know what is. Or is it the case that actually many of the MAGA supporters don't watch this stuff? They don't follow the news. They won't have seen these clips. They're simply not paying attention to the news cycle.
Again, I think you make great points, and it's not just one thing. I think a lot of it is that they don't watch the news. But to be honest, most people don't watch the news, left or right, center. Most folks are just not interested. And especially over the last year or so, when things are so depressing, a lot of people who used to follow the news, current events, have just turned it off and don't want to listen.
And Fox didn't cover it, right? Fox didn't even cover. So no. Fox had a couple of clips which made her look sane.
Yep.
Said there was a little bit of a bust up, but they didn't show the real clips.
Above and beyond that, here's the thing, and this is the second reason, in my opinion, why this will never, scenes like that with the Pam Bondi finger pointing and shouting, will never change MAGA voters' minds, because they like that. They love that. I can't tell you how many podcasts I've made or articles I've written saying that they are her. She is them. I said it about Trump, that he is them. They are him. That he says and does what they have in here, but haven't been brave enough to say. He is saying it. She is saying what they feel. They would like to have been behind that desk in Congress that day and give it to the libs. Own the libs. To tell them
possibly it's built on real anger, real resentment, a feeling of disenfranchisement. There are real feelings and hurt there. But of course, these are being used and manipulated by grifters to destroy the system. Essentially, is going to make them poorer and poorer. I don't want to sort of, say that there aren't genuine feelings, that everyone's grifting here. But the trouble is this anger that she's displaying is not going to solve any of their problems, even if maybe they do latch onto it and see it as part of the solution. It's clearly not.
I have never been a big supporter of the wisdom of MAGA voters. I have on many occasions called them morons and imbeciles, as you well know. So I'm going to say it again.
It's what endears you. It's what endears you to so many people, David.
In an effort to get more subscribers, I'm going to say that MAGA is composed primarily of morons and imbeciles. Because if you're a MAGA voter, a Trump supporter, and you love what Bondi did, if you think that's good stuff, then you are definitely an imbecile. You're not an American. You're an imbecile, and you're a disgrace. I only say that if you support Donald Trump today, after all he has said and done to hurt you, the average American, either middle class or lower middle class or lower class, he's hurting you. Pam Bondi doesn't give a damn about you, and all her anger and finger pointing is not about you. It's not trying to protect you. She was actually trying to protect pedophiles, Mr. and Ms. QAnon. I thought you were all about protecting the children and about protecting the child trafficking ring, which took place in the back of a pizza parlor in Washington, D.C., run by Hillary Clinton. Remember that? Well, in reality, it seems to be run by the Republicans under Jeffrey Epstein. And you don't see.
It turns out there are a lot of mentions of pizza as well, apparently. Pizza was a code word, and it's in some of the files, but just not in the way that which is ironic, given that QAnon seemed so absolutely barking mad, claiming that a pedophile ring was running the world, and it was composed of the most powerful people, and it had something to do with pizza. That's all in there, but
it's all in there, and that's why I'm saying, and people are going to get upset with me again. I don't care about mocking MAGA supporters who still support Trump and the Republican Party today, because their entire anger was originally based on the nonsense that the Democratic Party was a party of child murderers, child molesters who trafficked internationally in children. Now that it turns out that it was the Republicans for the most part, and that Trump was a good friend of the head pedophile, and Pam Bondi is protecting Trump, wouldn't even turn around to say, I'm sorry to victims of Jeffrey Epstein. Why aren't you, MAGA, rising up in 99% of you and decrying Trump and MAGA and Bondi? You're not. And
Cash Patel and the name,
all of them
goes on.
Because you're just hypocritical. You have so much misplaced anger about you don't even know what, that you will take whatever Trump and Bondi and MAGA says, as long as it looks like they are owning the libs. And I'm sorry, that just gets me so angry. To answer your question, there's nothing, Jonathan, that can be said or done about the Epstein files or anything else that implicates Trump or MAGA officials that will change the mind of the majority of Republican voters and Trump supporters. Absolutely nothing, in my opinion.
That's a sad place. I mean, we've got time for one more topic here, and it seems to be that if you move up the food chain into those who are, slightly more politically engaged, there's this toxic idea, which it kind of reminds me a little bit of Russian nihilism as well. The idea that the system's broken, therefore the only way to fix it is to smash it into little pieces and start again, which if you look at history, that's never really worked particularly well. The Russian Revolution, not a roaring success. I mean, for those who haven't really read it, didn't turn out so good. It seems to me, at least, that incremental evolutionary change, very conscious, very purposeful, but evolutionary change is something that is much better in political systems. Anything that is too precipitous or sudden or seeks to sweep away existing checks and balances almost always ends in autocracy. And autocracy is incredibly inefficient, incredibly destructive, incredibly painful for everybody involved. Is this what you see here in some of the MAGA Illuminati? A conscious effort to destroy the foundations of a democratic system, to give way to who knows what, although I suspect some kind of Orwellian tech fascist superstate.
No, it's a great question. I'm glad you actually brought it up. We just have a few minutes left on this episode. That's a great question, and it's actually been voiced recently. It's been written about in a few different areas, including I think the Atlantic, great article. And that was the thesis, Jonathan, that when you put all of this together, whether it's the Epstein files, the crushing of or destruction of NATO, the destruction of the institutions here in the United States, the dissing of all our allies, and on and on and on, the tariffs and ruining our economy. Is that, in fact, part of a larger picture, which is just to deconstruct, to destroy all the institutions of a democracy, of international and national law? Is that the point? To actually burn it all down, that it's not any one thing, and they're not just angry at child trafficking or pedophilia or taxes being too high or being against global warming, not believing in climate change. No, it's those are just excuses around the periphery that they give to their supporters while they take a chainsaw, literally, like Doge did under Elon Musk, and destroy all the institutions of democracy, of our constitutional republic. And actually, not just here. As you know, it's spreading to Europe, Western Europe right now. It's part of a larger picture of the far right authoritarians to destroy not Western civilization, to destroy democracy, to destroy the international rules-based order, period. That's what it's all about. What's going to come up out of this? Nothing good. Chaos, probably 3 spheres of influence under authoritarians, and they are going to divvy up the world. They've already started. It's already out there. They're just in the, I don't know if it's the middle or beginning stages of finalizing this tripartite division. And it's disgusting. It's very far along. And certainly here in America, people don't get it. I don't think they do in Europe either, to be honest with you. They just don't get it because it's so terrifying and it's too complicated. They just can't believe that Western democracy, especially, the UK, here in America, and some of the other countries in Europe, they can't believe that these countries, these leaders would be part of the destruction of their world, of Western democracies, of international rules-based order, and then supplant it with fascism, essentially authoritarianism, dictatorship. That's what's going on. It's horrible.
Nothing good.
It's nothing good. And actually, let's make that the point, the topic of one of our next dictators, because it falls right in with the title of dictators, because that's what's going on.
It does. And in fact, we have to return to some sense of normalcy, and we have to try to build back what we've got better rather than smash it all up, I think. And there's still a chance for that, but it's dwindling, it's diminishing, and it requires significant public consciousness and effort if we're gonna achieve that. But let's tackle that one in the next one.
Yes,
lots of stuff we've covered here. I'm glad we did this emergency podcast while the themes were still fresh, and I think it's getting a pretty good. We had lots of great comments, and we'll probably garner a lot more.
We never do this on a Sunday, but because of the Pam Bondi debacle, we did, as Jonathan said, almost an emergency session or episode of the Dictators. We will be back this next Friday again with, I believe it's the 20th, with another episode of the Dictators at this time and every Friday. So please come back, subscribe to the No Delusion Zone as well as Silicon Curtain, and tell others to do the same. Jonathan, thank you very much. And let's plan on doing this about the destruction of the Western democracies and the rule-based order.
Absolutely. And thank you to all the great comments today. I really appreciate everyone sharing their opinions there. For now, though, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you all, and see you next time.